So, hey everybody, thanks for joining us today at this month's Cosmic Conversation. Today we have our guest speaker here today, Leah Ramsay. She is a principal science writer for the Space Telescope Science Institute, and today we're going to learn all about the power of storytelling as it relates to space science and the inner workings of what it takes to build out a story, because there always is one. So Leah Ramsay has 20 years of multimedia communication experience for science and nonprofit organizations, including the National Geographic Society, the Smithsonian Channel, DC Vote, and the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics. Leah is currently a senior science writer for Space Telescope Science Institute, where she endeavors to bring traditional storytelling techniques to the groundbreaking discoveries of NASA's astrophysics missions. So Leah leads writing efforts for webtelescope.org and for the ongoing news from the universe on ViewSpace.org, which is part of Universe of Learning. So I will hand it off to Leah now. So thank you for being here, Leah. And I will mute myself.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm really excited because I don't get a chance to kind of talk about what I do with non-writers very much. We talk with each other a lot and debate the minutia of grammar and capitalization, which, if you're really into it, I actually kind of enjoy those discussions. But I had fun, like, kind of thinking about what I would say today. So, and I'm sure I will leave some things out, but as I understand, there's a section at the end of this for questions. So please, I really welcome those because there's a million things I've thought of that I would love to share and say, but I'll probably forget some of it. So I prepared some things, and I will share my screen because I want to tell you like the areas that Jesse mentioned that I work on, webtelescope.org and ViewSpace. I want to show you some things there that I've worked on and what my thinking was. But first, about like the importance of storytelling in science communications, I wanted to maybe start with a story I'm sure you all know that has had a lot of impact and stood the test of time, which are some of the, it's almost like the holy grail of scientific communication where it's something everyone's familiar with. There's a kernel of real science there, but it's also a really wonderful, memorable story. So, it says that I think you need to enable my participant screen sharing.
Alrighty, let me do that. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, I think Erica has to. Okay, you should be set now.
Thank you. Oh, yep. Okay. Okay, so now hopefully you are seeing my screen and the famous story of Isaac Newton and story of his discovering gravity by an apple falling on his head. Are you seeing that, Jesse? Can you nod your head for me? Thank you. Okay. So essentially, this is a simple, I feel like can be a loaded term. There can be like a bit of negativity attached to that, like simplifying, but really walking the line between accuracy and understandability and interest people were like, oh, but that's not easy. But that's why science writers like me get paid, because it's, we balance as we walk that line. So essentially, this famous story is turning this, the Principia Mathematica, I may have mispronounced that, into this, which, some scientists may balk at that, but I think even most young children around the world are like, Newton, I've heard of him. Oh, the apple fell on his head. He discovered gravity. The apple falls to the earth. And then I think the, people that are like, wait, how did the apple fall to the earth? Why? Like the people that have an interest and want to know more, this story will draw them in. People that, just do not, they're getting the very basic idea and the kernel of real is there anything inaccurate here? It's not fully accurate that, and you can just, for a science writer, we would joke about the meetings we would have with Isaac Newton and about, and scientists about, well, you have to include this and this and this, but this has taken high mathematics and physics and turned it into some literally like a folk tale type of story that is memorable and will draw in people that are interested in the higher level aspects of it. And of course, one of the beauties of this story, I have to bring it down a little to be under the controls. Okay, I'm going to move that to the bottom. Sorry, everyone. So the beauty of this is not just, the apple falling and of course hitting on the head, it's like it shocked his brain, but also it ties back to famous stories about a turning point in knowledge, both something you trace back to the book of Genesis, but also the Epic of Gilgamesh, much older. And this is like an ancient idea, and it continues to evolve, which I will show you. This is obviously a story I'm very interested in, but Steve Jobs, this is the original logo he designed for Apple Computer Co. And there is Newton, and there is it looks like, I hope you all can see, the apple almost has a little halo around it. It's falling, it's about to hit him. He's there with his books, and it's about to dawn on him. And Steve Jobs wanted that association back to Newton, this great transformational thinker. And it's, the story continues to evolve. And, I've wondered to myself, where will the apple go next? It's become this great metaphor for knowledge. And so I think, to me, I'm like, God, the ultimate compliment as a communicator is, I wish I'd come up with that. And I'm like, it is absolute genius. It's making these deep connections with storytelling and knowledge that go way, 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 way back. And then, into something evolving that everyone can understand. And something else I wanted to get across to you all today is, what writing is, thinking, there's a lot of variety of things I do in my job. And some of them I would say are are traditional writing. Like here, I'm showing our website, which I did a lot of writing for, something like coming up with a tagline for when webs, actually started operations, science mission begins. And this is a press release I worked on here. Early universe protocluster, which was very exciting. So this is a very traditional form of writing that you might not be surprised to hear that I work on. But then there's also something like this I wanted to present that is a little less traditional writing, something that I developed and came up with that we showed on the homepage of this website. I hope you all can see that. Okay, maybe I'll. So clearly with that, there's not a lot of actual words. Each image has one word, but there is a narrative that goes with this. This first page ties back, it's a ground-based image that ties back to the earliest sky watchers looking up at the stars and wondering. And it's also something we, most people can identify with today, looking up at the moon, looking up at the stars, wondering. And then we take that through technological innovation with web, to fulfill that wonder. And I've always really loved this image, and I selected the images to use throughout this as well, which you might not traditionally think of as writing, but sometimes it's kind of the structure and how the images help tell the story is often for me a big part of my job as well. And then we move from innovation to exploring. And here, we're showing web dramatically, but I think that can go, you could imagine ancient explorers like on a shore, and then they develop a ship that can make it all the way across the ocean. They go exploring. It's a very universal human story. And then there's like to the moment of discovery, and we see the visible wavelengths turning to infrared to reveal the infrared universe, which is Webb's story of discovery. So I really liked coming up with that. And even though the actual text is very simple, it's something I spent a lot of time thinking about the narrative and kind of laying out and which images would best express that. And then moving on to ViewSpace. I don't know how familiar you are with our sliders. I think one of the previous Cosmic Conversations did do a sample of sliders, but this is another idea that I came up with. So the idea generation was also part of the writing in this case. Sometimes, often writers are given assignments, and sometimes you're asked to kind of generate the ideas. So it's a little bit of both. And again, there's not a ton of text here. But sometimes that's a really interesting challenge in writing, is when there's less to work with, it all, for me, like spurs the innovation. And so I knew that these images existed. Let me get back here to the beginning of they're based on data. And I thought this would be a really interesting but unexpected take on the concept of interacting galaxies, and something that a general audience could identify with, because it's our galaxy, the Milky Way, and what it'll be in the future. And I feel like that can inspire a sense of awe and a sense of, oh, like, would this affect me? And the answer, of course, is no. And we talked about how to phrase that. Someone, I remember, suggested, but don't worry, you'll be dead. I was like, maybe we could rephrase that part less negative. And I'll run through the slider for you, but the thing I came up with down here, we have a bit of like more text for people that are interested in more narrative presentation. Stargazers of the future are in for quite a show, as like a conclusion, rather than kind of the don't worry, you'll be dead, kind of a more negative take on it. So it was really fun to see this come together visually, because of course, when I was writing it, it wasn't actually sliding. So, and even the little identifiers in the image, again, very short text, but coming up with that something that would be explanatory, but not too much, not too long. Something else that we come up with as writers. And again, like keeping this, you see the sentences on the lower level, like keeping it pretty just to one sentence, one line, is like a really interesting challenge. And I really enjoyed coming up with the idea and working on this one. Whoops, my computer can be a little sensitive with getting off screen. And then Jesse, if we have time, and I can't see you anymore, but I'd like to run through this Orion's Fire.
Yeah, we have time. Yeah, okay. That's cool.
So this was a project, we wanted to do something that had, in addition to astrophysics, had connection to human life and human culture, and create some videos for ViewSpace on that. And we also wanted to try to have stories that were not solely about European, or about the West, the global West or the global North, and white astronomy. So that's something we've been thinking about here at Space Telescope, and did some research on some potential topics. And this was one, oh, I did really want to mention this. This actually started, I received an assignment to write a social media post on William Herschel discovering the Orion Nebula. So I started looking into it, and I can't see anyone's face right now. We can discuss later. But I was like, wait a minute, you can see Orion with the naked eye. And the more I looked into it, I was like, well, that's not accurate at all that he discovered it, because the ancients could see this, and there's evidence they saw it, and they developed, they observed it. And so I decided to make this piece about, I realized it would fit really well into a basic 3-act structure of observation of Orion over time, and how knowledge has developed over time. But really, cumulatively I discovered in my research. And it was a really wonderful story to put together because based on the technology available, whether that was naked eye observations or early observatories in South America, Maya observatories, or all the way up to Hubble with the extreme detail that can be captured, the knowledge was really cumulative and built over time, but nothing was wrong. It was just building of knowledge. So it's a little combination of, a narrative over time with these three structures from Maya astronomy, early telescope European astronomy, and modern day Hubble astronomy. But and also how science is done and how science evolves over long periods of time. And it really became a wonderful story that I was really happy to work on. And it's about 4 minutes long, so I don't know if we want to watch the whole thing, but I will like to scroll through it. And one of the most important parts, I think, is this beginning section on Maya astronomy. And we worked with both, I found these gorgeous images. Here's one by Stéphane Guissard, where he was, in a Mayan ruins, and you can see in his images the Orion Nebula, which really beautifully illustrates the point that we're making. And I swear by the end, and I will say, it was such a wonderful privilege to have the time to devote to some of this research and image gathering and really like finding the texts that discuss this. And one of the key, so in the Maya culture, they described it as like the fire of creation, and because it kind of had like a fiery smoke. And here, the connection that was made was there's these three stones and the fire pot, which this is the only image I could find, and the designer made it look really nice and made it work. But you can see here that they saw the three stars in the sky surrounding the nebula as being those three stones supporting the fire in the middle. So it was a really clear connection we could make there with the visuals for the story. And then the you can actually trace back where Orion was in the sky on this date and how it coordinates with their the stories they built around that. And it was the dawn of a new age in their circular calendar. And we move through, then we move into the age of telescopes. There's some great archival imagery. The telescopes were just for observation, so there's some hand drawings here, the stars being numbered. And the first image of Orion, and this quote, the quotes here represent the knowledge evolving over time. And are stars fixed, or do they have like this life cycle and evolving? And so and then this is a beautiful fade the designer did from the original telescope image to what Hubble is able to show us. And then we really brought it back in the end to like with elements being created and by stars and supernovae. The Mayan idea that this was the fire of creation, I would say, is they had very limited equipment, and some of it was they were extrapolating and coming up with ideas, but they weren't wrong, which I found was a fascinating truth. So I think that concludes my what I wanted to share. I'm trying to stop sharing so that we can discuss.
Oh, yes.
Stop share. There it is.
There it is. Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. That was such a good oversight of the different types.
Yeah, I don't know if the scrolling through worked really well, but now you all know. If you didn't know before, that video is there to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can drop the link in the chat here too. And I liked how you talked about sort of the smaller, well, I don't want to say smaller stories, but the stories like the wonder, the innovate, and the discover, like that video, how you're using key words, but there's such a built out story beyond those words. And then how that story is very similar to like what you do with like sliders. Like we have all these information about these sliders, right? Like whatever the target is that we're talking about, whatever the science is that we're talking about, there's so much stuff to sort of filter through to get to the simplified sentences that you're creating, and then going into the video with the celestial tour, how that story gets built out. And we have 4 minutes, which feels like a lifetime compared to the slider and then the video,
Yeah.
and what kind of story we can tell when we have that time too, and how we build out that more human side of connections. But I loved how the human connection was there at every project you talked about, though. Like
Oh,
even the small one, even with the wonder, with the ground-based image looking up, how we look up at the stars, that's still connecting us to the cosmos. That slider, how the Milky Way, in our solar system, connecting us again. And then, with the human connections with the Maya, and the more encompassing, like talking about, the history and development of telescopes, and how we evolved to looking up at the night sky. So I'll stop I'll stop talking, but
thanks. You
I
reminded me of another important thing I wanted to say when I think when you're
mm-hmm,
getting started with any kind of science communication
mm-hmm,
is who are you talking to is always the
mm-hmm,
first question. And
mm-hmm,
I mean, sometimes we're talking specifically to scientists, but usually our focus is general public. And then you decide what medium is best for the story, which I think the things I showed you are a good example of that. Will it be a video? Will it be a press release, which is obviously text heavy, is almost the like a simple, like oversimplified way to put that, or an infographic, or they all have a story, but it's like, which way will you tell it? And some of those will have more text. Some
mm-hmm.
of them you'll use images to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say here too, when we're on projects like this, sometimes in the beginning we don't even know what the product's going to look like at the end. Like all we have sometimes is just sort of a theme or a story, and then we're kind of tasked with conceptualization. And before we even get to the production, it's
Yeah.
like, well, how can we make the biggest impact with the audience we want to get to? And picking that type of product, that all dictates what kind of impact it can have. And then the story comes out of that as well. Yeah, I really like that. I just want to see if there's, I'll stop hogging talking and let other folks, if people want to talk to or ask questions.
I was just curious what your background is. What is it? Science or just pure literature, or where do you come from?
I have a communications background. I studied my undergraduate major was called media studies. I took a lot of film classes, but also um, photography analysis classes, and rhetoric and things like that. A real nice mix. And then my early professional career was in documentary film production and things like that. So I've had a nice, really mixed background, and some of that was for science related organizations like Smithsonian and National Geographic. So it's been a real privilege to be able to adapt my communication skills to different workplaces and topics.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that, David, too, because when I'm talking to communities and I'm saying, you can work at NASA, you can get involved with NASA, there's different ways how, I don't think they really realize that writing is a huge part of it too. And you don't have to have, going to school, you don't have to have that astronomy degree to necessarily get into the writing. And it's the same thing with education as well. It's, if you have the passion, you have the drive, and you can tell really compelling stories, you can also have a place when talking about space and science, especially at these different types of institutions. So I tell, especially high school audiences that are still thinking about, what they want to do at the next phases of their life, and they're kind of maybe a little overwhelmed with the possibilities, and they're starting to think like, maybe I can't do this. I talk to them about all these different types of unique pathways, and science writing is always one that they kind of like, oh wow, I didn't know that was a thing. And it's the same thing with like graphic design too, is they have no idea that the arts and creativity side of space, and when talking about space is very much so at the heart of what we do here too. So
It's
really
at the heart of
cool.
NASA, which I think is a very
Yeah.
important message to get across. It's
Yeah.
not just, it's the discovery and the sharing it.
Yeah, exactly. The sharing it is such a crucial part, because that's the impact on the public too. So all right, and we have like 1 more minute. If anyone wanted to ask any other questions, go ahead, Jim.
I just had a couple of comments. I'm an example of one of those people. I don't have a degree in astronomy. I've got a degree in radio, TV reporting. So I've got a communications degree too. But I'm glad I liked hearing you describing the issue you had with the person that discovered the Orion Nebula, because when we're doing planetarium shows here, I try to be careful using that word discovered, because what I usually say is the person who first documented, observing whatever it is in space, because we don't know that. I mean, probably other people throughout history have observed the same thing, and they may have actually documented what they observed, what those documents might have been lost. So, and then I tell kids, if you ever discover something in space, make sure you write it down and tell everybody.
Yeah. That's a really great point. Documented is a good way to put it, because I also think it's important not to go so far as to diminish like the people who made important observations and did a good job documenting that. That stuff is important, but you don't want to leave people out. So I think finding balance there is great. Yeah.
Well, awesome. If you have any other questions about science writing or anything at all, do email me and I can connect with Leah and get any answers you want. Happy to answer outside of this too. So
yeah, I realized I talked a little bit long, so I hope
no
if
worries.
anyone has anything they wanted to ask questions about or something, please let me know. Let Jesse know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Leah. That was such a great conversation. And thank you all for joining us today. So have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you all later. All right. Bye.